Okay, so today's talk is Buddhism 101, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path. Okay, so as a younger person, my father died, and that kind of set me down this slippery slope of kind of depression and anxiety. But I think just being a young person is hard anyway, because you know, the world is not fantastic, and you've got all these hormones in your body, and it's not like you're in a tribe that gives you a rite of passage and tells you how to be an adult or what being a human being is, or you've got this set kind of culturally inculcated set of beliefs that gives you guidance. You know, we kind of gave that up with material. When we embraced materialism, we gave up the tribe and we gave up Christianity, many of us anyway. So in postmodernism, you kind of have to find your own meaning, which is a little bit bewildering, but it's also a kind of great freedom as well, to the freedom to uncover who you are, what is meaning for you, what is a good human being for you. Personally, I was so devastated by my father's death that I just kind of was suicidal and realized I could die at any time, and just kind of thought, what's the meaning of life? And no one around me was speaking about that, you know, and it wasn't on TV, it wasn't in school. Yeah, it was like people were living their life with their head in the sand, avoiding the most important question. And like people never had conversations about death or about what a life that is finite means and why we're here. And maybe, you know, they did in their private hours, and their, you know, they just didn't with me. And no one my age was asking those questions. It was more like, see this hickey I got from this boy? Oh my God, that's such a big hickey. Look, mine's bigger. What are you going to wear on Mufti Day? And like, yeah, kind of, it wasn't part of our vocab. So, yeah. And so when I met Buddhism, like I'd left home at 15 and became a hippie, and hippies embrace like a wide spectrum of spiritual ideas, some of them a little bit woo, and some of them a little bit more maybe grounded in some kind of more verifiable data. And but what was common was this kind of idea of New Age salvation, that there, you know, everything's beautiful, and that there's a God a creator who loves us, and you know, if we could just ascend to our primal nature, we would finally have a Garden of Eden and everything would be all right. And that kind of mishmash of spirituality that they'd appropriated from other cultures. Because the brutality of colonialism had destroyed our own. I'm not cynical at all, am I? Yeah, no, there's some good stuff in there, and I don't deny it. And I think, you know, truth is a very subjective thing. But one thing was a common thread in these New Age philosophies, or, you know, the kind of more earth-based spirituality, they didn't talk a lot about suffering. And as a young person, that's what I had. I had suffering, I had anxiety, I had angst, and no one was addressing that. Or they just, you know, dismiss it like, well, you just need to, you know, lift your vibe and don't be low vibe. And yeah, so what I loved about Buddhism, and some people are like the other extreme. They're like, Buddhism is so pessimistic and so life denying, and I don't think Buddhism is just life denying and pessimistic, because it gives it still has that element of transcendence, that element of liberation, and compassion for all beings. And everybody does have an essentially good, wise nature that they can uncover, even if it's not what they think it is. But what I love about the Buddhist teachings, first of all, is they're real. Like, they address that real issue. And the Buddha summed it up really well in his Four Noble Truths. The first truth is the truth of suffering, or stress, which is, what is suffering? Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, despair, separation from what is loved, not getting what we want, or getting what we want and losing it. In short, clinging to the self, an unchanging, permanent self, is suffering. And for me, that wasn't hard to understand, because I'd experienced it. For some people, maybe they have really good karma, maybe they have a good life, I don't know, they're well adjusted, they're like, I don't think life's suffering, I think it's happiness, or a mixed bag. But very few people can get through to middle age without some kind of understanding that there is element of life that is stressful and unpleasant. Even the world we've created, for our children, where we do this loveless toil. A lot of us, hate our jobs, and there's a lot of jobs that are just kind of meaningless, and don't nourish us. And the fact that we have to just toil for so many hours, even though so many things are mechanized, the whole system of money, there's just so much suffering all around, but the good news is that is not all there is, which is the second noble truth, which is, the cause of suffering, which is craving existence, non-existence, pleasure. And I spoke before about how we misapprehend the nature of existence, and we, based on this idea, not understanding that our self arises due to causes and conditions, and is impermanent and conditioned. Relatively it exists, but ultimately it doesn't exist quite as it appears. It arises due to non-self elements, and those non-self elements in turn are dependent upon many other complex causes and conditions. So therefore we're empty of an unchanging, permanent self. Take away one of those elements and the whole rug comes undone. So then the third noble truth comes about because we see the end of suffering, which is, yes, because you're worth it. So understanding that the self is provisional and conditioned, we seek the unconditioned, we seek nirvana, freedom from suffering, beyond birth and death. And people can be like, isn't that just another empty promise of salvation, another pie in the sky? So try it for yourself. The Buddha said, test my teachings like a goldsmith tests gold in order to determine their purity. Hammer them out, burn them, melt them, and try it for yourself. In meditation, we can see that the mind is uncontrolled. We can see that there are negative emotions, that we have a lot of thoughts. And if we meditate longer, we see there is space between thoughts, and that we don't have to just jump on every thought and feeling that comes into our mind, that there is a luminous spaciousness, the backdrop of all those clouds. Resting in that peace, you start to see there is a possibility for other parts of the brain and mind we're not using, and that there is a peace and a basic goodness and a oneness, if you like, that you can try for yourself, you can see for yourself, through, unfortunately, modern society is just really taking you out of yourself to look at the material world and constantly giving you input, and taking you away from abiding and being comfortable with just sitting with yourself. So meditation helps us go back to our true home and to touch peace. So the third noble truth is the truth of nirvana, the cessation of suffering. And then the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Noble Path, which is like, if anyone asked me what is Buddhism, I would say the Eightfold Noble Path. It's a beautiful, concise way to show you how to live a life of dignity and compassion and ethics, and to seek true unconditioned freedom. And personally, I feel like it's so important to, instead of really giving young people this message that either they should distract themselves in really shallow things, and to insult their intelligence. Like, I just remember a lot of the teen movies I saw where young people were just completely involved in, encouraged to be entitled and shallow, you know, just like, she's a cheerleader and he's into cars, and you know, they have sex, and you know, like, just really shallow. Nothing. I don't remember any movie where young people were like, you're the future, what do you think is meaning, what do you think is a true human, what is the path of a true human being. I just remember feeling as a young person that most of the media was insulting my intelligence and kind of not respecting that I had a capacity to think about deeper things. And I feel like it would be so good if someone was giving people rites of passage that was like, you have this amazing goodness inside of you, and you have the capacity to make the world better, and you do matter. And I'm not here to tell you how to do that. You have to work that out for yourself, but it's there, and I honor that in you. Like, imagine if we were giving people that message instead of like, go out, make money, get drunk, have sex, be mindless, fuck up the earth even more. Just think about yourself and your pleasure, and nothing else matters. And, you know, or the world's going to die anyway, so you might as well just get stoned, you know, like, just kind of this really sad, life negating message, you know. Anyway, so the first one is right view on the Noble Eightfold Path, which is understanding the Four Noble Truths. And and the next one is right thought. So the mind can go in a lot of negative directions, and mostly we're like a person who's riding an untrained horse. We're just being dragged behind wherever our mind goes. And that's why we need to bring this wild horse mind to the post of mindfulness, to the post of the here and now with the rope of mindfulness, and actually train our mind so that we're riding the horse, it's not dragging us. Right thought in the sense that we develop wholesome thoughts like loving kindness, the wish that others be well and happy, compassion that they be free from suffering, and ourselves. Understanding interconnectedness, developing wisdom, you know, if there is wholesome thoughts, creating and giving rise to more of them. You know, contemplating Dharma, contemplating meaning, contemplating what is good, what is a true human being, you know, versus unwholesome thoughts like, you know, I'm going to take revenge, and kind of really downward spiral, you know, doesn't go anywhere good kind of thinking. And it's okay to, you know, feel down or negative things, but to not let them fester, you know. The whole idea is that you want it to be like a river. You want it to keep flowing and not get stuck on something, because that's when it starts to fester. And to pick and choose, to realize there are some thoughts you can just let go of. You don't need to pursue them. Plant some roses on your compost, so to speak. And so that also means like not cultivating aversion and hatred, because it actually burns the mind. It makes the mind suffer. Anger, oh, that's a whole different Dharma talk. Can't suppress anger, but acting on it is usually not a good idea. Or turning it into something more wholesome, like Greta Thunberg did, with her activism and climate change. So turning it into something more positive, turning your passion into compassion, or doing something to counteract whatever injustice or unwholesomeness you're angry about. And sometimes it's just somebody's harmed us, so we might report them, or we might just avoid them, depending on what's wise. And healthy boundaries that's not wrong, and it's not wrong to defend yourself or kind of stand up for someone who's being bullied or whatever. And then there's right speech, which is the Buddha said, all that we are arises with our thoughts we make the world. Speak or act with a virtuous mind and happiness follows. Like the shadow that never leaves, speak or act with an unwholesome mind and suffering follows, like the cart that follows the ox. With speech, look at Hitler's speeches, look at the hatred and bigotry he engendered in the world. So speech, or the speech that married people dump on each other that can lead to divorce, or the cruelty that parents sometimes unknowingly vomit on their kids, or vice versa. That something cruel that someone said without thinking can stay with you years later. You can hold on to it. Maybe someone just said something hurtful and you internalize it, and it makes you down on yourself. You think you're not good enough, or you find it hard to believe you're worthy of good things just because of one person, saying something without thinking. So there are certain kinds of speech to avoid, and there are certain kinds of speech to cultivate. But just to know the power of speech, that it makes ideas manifest. And it creates feelings and thoughts and actions. It leads to actions. So, if you look at the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King for the civil rights movement, and how that led to, human rights. So it can have a really positive effect as well. To avoid our slander, harsh speech, trying to divisive speech, like trying to split two people up. Hey, did you hear that? Like when people want to make friends doubt each other, or and idle speech we do a lot. It's okay to make conversation just to make someone feel at ease, but like if it goes on too long and it's not leading anywhere good, it just becomes gossip, when we could be discussing something more meaningful, and so the kind of speech to cultivate is like encouragement, kindness, honesty that is tempered with wisdom. Because you don't want to just say to someone, it may be honest to say, hey, that zit on your nose is horrible. How can you go out like that? But it's not helpful. It's not useful. And empathy and speaking about meaningful things, Dharma, and words that create well-being, basically. And sometimes silence is golden, but sometimes people use silence as a way to just hide their inadequacies too, and they actually are silent when really there's a lot of things they need to say. Like there's a lot of men who are silent a lot and really need to say something like, I love you, I care about you, I value you, I feel sad, I need help, So that kind of silence can be very deadly. Then there is right action. So it's pretty standard, don't kill, because what beings hold most dearly is their life. Don't steal. And that would include like, don't rape the planet, don't exploit workers, and don't commit sexual misconduct. Obviously, if you're in a polyamorous relationship, that's cool because you've discussed it, but they always have caveats on that, and it needs to be a dialogue with your partner, but using sexuality in a way that isn't harmful, that is loving and nurturing and beneficial. And obviously, if you're a monk or a nun, that would mean celibacy. And also like helping protect children from sexual abuse, helping protect people from sexual exploitation like human trafficking and so on. And cultivating wholesome actions of body, like helping prevent exploitation, caring for natural resources, protecting human and animal life, and so on. Like being vegetarian a few days a week is a good thing. I'm a hypocrite. Not being violent, protecting human rights, all of those things. Non-violence, not passiveness, but non-violence, benefiting others. And then right livelihood. So there are 5 kinds of jobs that Buddhists say are unwholesome, which is dealing in drugs, dealing in weapons, dealing in slaves, dealing in poisons like that you use to poison people, selling alcohol, being a butcher. One could say, is a glass of wine that harmful? Probably drinking in moderation is not a terrible thing, but so often it becomes more, it escalates. And like the money people spend on alcohol and the rage and the domestic violence, and how people just become really careless in what they say as well. So, it's a slippery slope. Like where I lived in India for 10 years, like so many men would drink to forget their troubles because they had a really shitty job and they were treated like crap by society. But they would harm their bodies and they would die at 50, and the money they spent on alcohol should have been going to their children for food. So I saw in that society and then they would beat their wives, So in that society, and quite often particularly amongst traumatized and poor sections of society, it has really devastating effects. And even, among the rich, it can lead to the same problems, can lead to other problems as well. And just numbing yourself, like maybe we need to ask, why am I living a life where I need to numb myself? Why am I living in a world where I need to numb myself? So, working in a way that doesn't harm the planet as much as possible, that benefits others, that offers a legitimate service, jobs that are without harm that I can think of, like being a teacher, being a doctor, being a nurse, so many, being a organic farmer. There's many jobs where it's ethically fine. And then right effort is choosing the right object of meditation, and making effort to cultivate virtuous thoughts, virtuous actions, virtuous mind states, and pursue the Dharma, basically. And just also, like in meditation, you got to be like the babysitter. The mind is like a toddler, so you just have to keep making sure the baby is not crawling out the door onto the highway. Just bring it back to the playpen, and not too tight, not too loose. Right effort. So then the 7th one is right mindfulness. So choosing the right object of meditation. Sometimes Hindus choose a candle, Buddhists don't, because it flickers. So the breath is a good thing, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which are observing the sensations of body, or body, mind, objects of mind. So physical, mental sensations or phenomena that arise in the mind. And just whatever you do in daily life, try to have mindfulness. Like when you're eating, like Buddhists in a monastery, when they eat very slowly and they really savor the food. And usually they'll eat in silence. And whatever you're doing, just do it. Just be there in the moment, you know, not going to the past, not going to the future. Just be in the present moment doing that thing. And that's not always easy with the fast pace of life we have. But it really does make a difference when you're just slowing down and living. And that's why Buddhists, they would come to the monastery on the full moon, and they just do a day's retreat and have a mindful meal. And they come back to, they have days of mindfulness where they just go and practice, you know, on their own, quietly, to remind themselves, because life is geared towards distraction rather than mindfulness. But the daily life awareness supports the peace of mind that develops through a daily meditation practice. Like if you meditate for half an hour a day, but then you just go and live a really distracted life, it won't. They have to, you know, they have to go together. And then the final one is right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, or wisdom. So that's the final and best one, which is like understanding as a result of developing sustained blissful meditation. You can gain insight into the end of all suffering and reach nirvana, where the mind becomes really sharp, and you can use it like a ray to shine your awareness on the body-mind continuum and realize its selfless, impermanent nature, and purify all karma and break through to nirvana. That's, of course, the actual process is much harder and the work of a lifetime. But part of right understanding, this profound compassion is born in you, where you see everyone as your second self. You're connected to everything, and therefore hatred is no longer possible, because you may condemn someone's actions and you may dislike their behavior, but when you have understanding of how they have become the way they are, you have compassion rather than hatred. Yeah. So that is my very short talk on, well, it's not short, it's 28 minutes. Buddhism 101, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path.